Well, good morning. Welcome to Debbie's Back Porch. So glad to have you with us. I'm going to make something very interesting. I'm making Pirozhki. I may not even be saying that right. This is like a Russian fried donut, and you can put in it anything. Today I'm using meat and cheese. You could even use jelly. This dough makes a wonderful jelly donut, and I'll show you that in another video. Here are your ingredients. Please pause and write them down. And hey, if you like our videos, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. And you'll get a notice when I post new videos about twice a week if you just click the little bell icon in the top right corner. Now let's get cooking. We're going to start with a very special dough. I have 3 cups of all-purpose flour. I'm going to use 4. I just have 3 measured now. 1 egg I've let come to room temperature. 3 tablespoons of melted butter. 1½ cup of warm milk. And then I've got 2 teaspoons of yeast, 2 teaspoons of sugar, and 1 teaspoon of salt. I'm getting out my KitchenAid. Really, I just as soon make these by hand and probably should have. I'm going to proof the yeast in my mixing bowl. And I'll start with the 1½ cups of warm milk. Now, the recipe actually says scalded milk, and I have in the past scalded it, but I've recently learned that if your milk is ultra pasteurized, you don't have to scald it. Just heat it up to about body temperature and it'll be fine. Now, if you're using active dry yeast, you can just use 1 packet. That measurement will work just fine. So if you're using active dry, you're going to let this sit for about 5 minutes and bloom. You proof it and it blooms, meaning it makes a froth on top. And that was my salt, by the way. You would let it proof without the salt. But I'm just going to go ahead because this is instant yeast and I don't have to wait. I've beat up an egg and dropped it in, and then I'm going to add about half of the flour that I have here. Now I'm going to use 4 cups altogether. So I'm putting about 2 cups in now, and this is very approximate, but about 2 cups. And I'm just going to mix this up until I make sure that all the flour is good and wet. And then we're going to let it sit here for about an hour covered and pre-ferment and start to bubble. And that's just going to add some lightness to our dough, to our batter. Right now it's a batter. Some lightness and some flavor. So when I get this mixed up well, and I still have a little bit more flour to add because I want to put about 2 cups in of the 4. I mix that in. I'll put a lid on top of this and then just let it sit right here on the counter until it starts to get a good bubble on it. Here I'm going to give you a close-up of the texture. Just really soupy. Then I'm just going to set this plate on it. Now the bubbling will take about 45 minutes to an hour, and then we'll take the next step. So after an hour, I'm going to put this up in the mixer, and I actually should have put a paddle on and not a dough hook. I have a little distraction here on my left in the person of 4-year-old Athena, and she talks a lot when we work together. So the paddle works better here. Don't do as I do, do as I say. Use the paddle. Now Athena's going to add the melted butter. It's been sitting here at room temperature, so it's somewhat solidified. But this is our 3 tablespoons full of melted butter, and we want to mix this in really well. And then we're going to add a cup of flour, just a little bit at a time. Now the last cup of the 4 is going to be added in at the end when we're kneading the dough, and I'm not going to actually knead it in the mixer. See how distracted I am? I forgot to lift it. So, you know, and if I only made videos when Athena didn't help, then I would never get them made. And she loves to make bread. So we're going to add this all a little bit at a time, and when I get it all in, I'll be back. The only thing I want to tell you is that you do have to scrape it down from the sides a good bit. We'll be back when we get all the flour in. So all the flour's in. It's just mixed up well. We haven't proofed it yet. And I want you to see the texture of this, because this really is the texture you want. It's a batter, not a dough. So I'm going to turn this out on a well-floured board. And I'm not 100% sure how much more flour we're going to work into it, but it's going to be about a cup. And I'll work it in until it feels right and it looks right, and I'll just have to show that to you. But you'll see it's very sticky, it's very loose. And where I'm pouring it out, I put lots of flour. And then I'm going to put a lot of flour right on top of it. And yeah, you could just go ahead and put a bunch of flour into the mixer and make it thicker than this. But the feel and the texture is very important. And you just don't want this to be too dry. See, I'm putting flour on top too. You want it to be a very loose and smooth batter. So it's easier to add flour than it is to add water. And it's really going to take a lot less flour than you think from the state of the dough right now. So I've got my dough scraper, and I'm just going to turn it and turn it and turn it until this gets to the point where it's not super sticky and that I can pick it up in my hands and knead it. And we'll end up kneading it, working it here for about 5 minutes altogether. And it's a really easy knead because of the texture. So just scrape and turn and scrape and turn. And if it's still too loose to handle, you add a little more flour, and then you scrape and turn and you scrape and turn. And it's still pretty darn sticky, but it's getting to the point where I can handle it. And I am going to stick with this and show you a little bit more of it, because this is an important part. And when you've worked in enough flour that you can actually handle this, pick it up in your hands and handle it, then we'll start kneading. And you may have seen me do this method of kneading before, where I just kind of beat it up and throw it around and stretch it. I don't do the traditional sort of kneading movement. You can if you want to, but this is just so much easier. So fold it and stretch it. And we're getting a texture here where we can handle this without it sticking to my hands. And then just start beating it up. And fold it and put a little flour and beat it up some more. So I'm going to do this now for 4 or 5 minutes until it's not sticky at all. And I'll just show you a little bit of it. I'm going to do a little time lapse here. And we're starting to get there. Still a little bit sticky, you can see. But just working and working. So we're just about there. I'm just going to finish up here and make sure that this is kneaded well, that I don't have any little pieces of flour, pockets of flour in there. See, this is my kneading. This is my working out your frustrations method. And that really is so much easier than the traditional spread it out, hit it with the heel of your hand, and a lot more fun. So now I'm going to form this into a ball and put it in my oiled proofing bowl and put a cover on it and let it sit here on the counter for about an hour until it doubles in size. And while that's proofing, we'll make the filling for our pirozhki. I think I'll just snap my fingers and clean this up by magic. I wish. So you could do this part by hand, but I'm going to use a food processor. I've got about a bunch of green onions here. Usually I just use about a half cup of chopped onions, but I had these green onions and they need to be used, and they're very pretty. So I'm going to use those. And then I'm going to put in 2 tablespoons full of dried dill. When I have fresh dill, I use that, just a couple of heads. But I have dried dill weed here. I've never made it with dill seeds, so I don't know what to tell you. I think it would take a little bit less. And then I'm going to add a tablespoonful of minced garlic. And if you want to use fresh garlic, 3 or 4 cloves ought to do it. I like a lot of garlic. That's really sort of to your taste, but you really want the garlic flavor. And the garlic and the dill together, they're so good. So I'm just going to pulse this a few times until it gets beat up very fine. I want this to be very fine, because we're going to put all of this with the meat and then in the pies, in the pirozhki. So we don't want any big chunks at all. I'll just show you what we've got there. And then I have over here a pound, a little bit over a pound, a couple ounces over, of 95.5 very lean beef. You don't have to have it that lean, but you do want it pretty lean. So I'm just going to break this up here in my cast iron skillet in really small pieces. Because remember, this is the filling of a pie. My little great-granddaughter called them Hot Pockets. And they sort of do look like Hot Pockets when you're done, but oh, they're so much better than Hot Pockets. So when I get this broken up and let it get started browning, then I'm going to add my dill and onion mixture. First, I'll go ahead and put a little salt and pepper in here. That's probably a half teaspoonful of salt. And then I'll grab my pepper mill and I'll just grind in pepper to taste. I'm using black pepper in this. I often use red pepper flakes, but I'll use black pepper in this. You use whatever you want. But if you're going to use black pepper, use the freshly ground. It just has a lot more flavor. Then I'm going to put in here a half teaspoonful of cumin, and I don't think I actually caught that on the tape. And we're going to cook that now. You see, now that's not really fat in there. That's liquid. And it will evaporate as it cooks. Then the onion and dill and garlic mixture. And I'll stir that in well. And then I'm going to let this sit on medium-low heat. And just kind of simmer away until the liquid all evaporates. Now, if you used a more fat ground beef, and you see some fat down in there, you can add a tablespoonful of flour and stir that in, and that should take care of the fat. Now, I've turned my heat off, and I'm adding in, this is about 3 ounces of grated Gruyere. If you want to use another cheese, that's fine. Some folks use Parmesan, any cheese that you like. Cheddar works fine, but Gruyere is so good. And then I'm going to just let it sit here and cool a bit while we get our dough ready to make our pirozhki. So back to our floured board, and here is my beautiful dough, and it has hydrated a lot as it rose. I'll let you see the texture here. And I'm going to put it out here and work it, just enough to take the little stickiness off of it. It got a little bit sticky while it was in there. I like to call this texture of dough bubblegum dough because it just feels like bubblegum. It's about that texture. And I'm going to cut it in half. This recipe is going to make about 18 pirozhki, but I'm only going to make 9 right now. I'm going to put the rest of it in my bowl and put it in the refrigerator to arrest any more rising. It'll rise, but it'll just be very slow. And then I'm going to use the rest of it tomorrow to make jelly donuts. So I'm just working it around, making it in a ball, getting a little surface tension on this. And I don't know what that was about. I'm sorry. Just adjusted my camera. And then I'm going to roll it out and cut these with a cookie cutter. And I'm going to use a 3 3/4 inch cookie cutter. But you can make these, well, and that will give me about 18 altogether, 9 in this batch. Roll it out. But you can make these in many different sizes. If I were making jelly donuts with this, I would use probably 2.5 to 3 inch to make little small jelly donuts. And you don't actually have to use a cookie cutter. You can just pinch off even pieces of dough and roll them out. Just a cookie cutter's a little easier for me. So just roll them out until they're, I don't know, about 1/4 inch thick. And you'll see as we go along, I didn't do a real great job of getting them to a uniform thickness. So they're going to end up being a little bit different in size, and that's okay because I have a little one eating, and I'll give her a little one. So this is about 1/4 inch thick, maybe just a little bit less. We're going to go with this. And I'll put a little flour out here just for my cookie cutter. And I'll cut out the first batch, and then work my dough back and roll it out again, and cut out the next batch. And you're going to get 8 or 9 out of this. And then we'll start our filling. So when they're all cut, I'm going to take each one. And this one's a little bit bigger than the other. It was the last one I cut out. I didn't get it rolled as thin. So I'm going to make one shape, which is a kind of a long torpedo shaped. That's kind of traditional. And I'm going to roll it out. And get it a little bit flatter. And you know, some people can fill these holding them in their hands. I can't. I'll show you how I do it. So I have a little bowl of water, and I'm just going to dampen the outside to make them stick together. And I used to see people years ago take this and hold it in their hands and fill it up and pinch it off all in one movement. I'm just not good at that. I'll try. So that's a little goat cheese. I have it listed in the ingredients. You just want to put just a little bit, and then a good portion of meat, couple 3 tablespoons full, whatever you think you can get in there. This is very stretchy dough, so you can fill them pretty full. See, I'm making a mess. I'm just going to have to lay this down. You see that dough's very stretchy. Just try to get all of that up in the middle. And then pull your dough up and connect it at the top. And then work down, just pinching it together all the way. And you're going to have extra dough at the ends, no matter what you do. Well, I mean, you could pinch it off, but I'm not going to. And just make sure that it's sealed up. Pinch it, stick another piece of dough on it, and work it in if you need to. We just don't want the meat coming out as we are cooking it. And then I turn it over and rub the seam against the board to make sure it's nice and sealed. And you know, that little meat you see there is not in the pie. I dropped it on the breadboard. So I'm going to take it out and pinch it together again. And this is really good pliable dough. This is not hard at all. And you can shape it kind of round, or you can shape it in a half moon, or you can make this sort of long torpedo shaped. Pinch the ends out. However you want to shape it. This is one shape. I'm going to make a more round shape with this one. And you know, because you're cooking them individually, you can make different sizes if you want to. The little 4-year-old won't eat a whole lot of this, so I'll make her a kind of small round one. Just roll this out. Kind of a round shape. Then I'll get a little cheese, a little of the goat cheese here. And I'm kind of stingy with this because I only got a 4-ounce package and I want to spread it out. You can add more if you want to. This stuff is not going to cook out. This dough is sturdier than you think it is. And then I'll put my meat. And oops, I got to dampen the edges a little bit to make sure they stick. Now, you know, you could make this with strips of beef. You could make this with like pulled pork. Just not a lot of sauce. You can get creative and put anything in these you want to. As I said, I'm going to make jelly donuts out of the next batch. This dough is just amazing. So pinch, pinch, pinch. And you know, you could flatten it out and leave it in this half moon shape like a regular tart, a turnover. But I'm going to round this one off a little bit. See, I had a little spot, so I pulled off some dough and I'm going to fill in the spot with it. And then I'll rub it on the board. Make sure I get a little surface tension and get it shaped and stuck together. I'll go ahead and do the rest of these. You can see I rounded that one off a little more. I'm going to make the big one a little more torpedo shaped. And then when I get all these done, I'm going to meet you at the stove. Now I'm going to pan fry these. You can deep fry them or you can bake them in the oven. If you let them bake in the oven at about 375, you want to let them rise first. So I put a little drop of dough in there just to check it. And you know, somehow or other I have splashed a little water on my lens. I'm sorry for that spot. I didn't notice it until I was done. So I oiled my little flat spider here and put the pirozhki on the spider and slid it off. These cook very quickly, about 1.5 minutes per side. And you just gauge it by how they look. They will cook all the way through very quickly. I mean, the bread will cook all the way through very quickly. The meat is already done. All you want to do is melt the cheese a little bit, warm the meat up, so you don't have to cook them long at all. When you start seeing the brown rising up the side, flip them over. And I always flip things with a spoon or a fork like that so I don't splash grease on myself. Even if you deep fry them, you have to turn them because they'll float. I have this on medium heat, by the way, not high, because they cook so quickly they'll burn before you know it. So I'm going to take them up now and put them over here on a rack to let them drain while I cook the rest. And then I'll plate this up and I'm going to show you this lovely meat pie. Not a Hot Pocket. Much, much better than a Hot Pocket. I'll be right back. Now you can make these small and serve them as an appetizer. You can serve them with a salad or soup. Usually you just pick them up and eat them by hand. But I'm going to cut this one down the middle so you can see the inside. And I've got a little horseradish and mayonnaise sauce here that I'm going to dip it in. My family dipped it in ranch dressing. And that was good too. And you know, this crust will surprise you. It's really soft. It is like a donut. And they taste so wonderful. And just be creative. Put anything in it you want. It's a method and a crust. And then the filling is up to you. I really hope you try these. Hope you like them. I'm going to make some jelly donuts later and I'll show you that. And I hope to see you again tomorrow.